Has Samsung done enough to regain public trust after the Note 7 debacle?
And will Australians embrace facial recognition with Mastercard ID check? Vertical Hold is proudly brought to you by Alcatel. Welcome to Vertical Hold, the tech show where we channel surf through the headlines in search of the big picture. I'm Adam Turner. I'm joined by a man whose dream is to sit on a beach earning 20%, Alex Kidman. Alex, what's new in tech?
The latest beta of Apple's iOS 10.3 promises some unusual new features. For owners of Apple's AirPods, you'll be able to use Find My iPhone to find your lost AirPods. Siri's also getting an upgrade, and for all Aussie sports tragics, it'll apparently be able to tell you cricket stats if you ask it nicely. There's no word on when 10.3 will actually drop to devices, although Apple did release a security update for iOS that you should apply to your devices this week.
3D TV appears to be officially dead, with LG and Sony abandoning 3D support in their 2017 television lineup after Samsung did the same last year. While it was launched with great fanfare in 2010 to coincide with the 3D revival in the cinemas, the novelty soon wore off, and it turned out that most viewers weren't that keen to wear 3D glasses in their lounge room.
Reports suggest that Samsung scored itself a temporary exclusive on Qualcomm's new Snapdragon 835 processor, expected to power the Samsung Galaxy S8. That's bad news if you're a Samsung competitor, however, as Samsung's also revealed that it won't launch the Galaxy S8 at Mobile World Congress, instead delaying the release until, as per the current rumours, April this year.
China is stepping up its VPN crackdown in order to make it harder for citizens to bypass the blocks on popular foreign websites. New laws mandate that virtual private network providers must seek the approval of the government in order to operate in China, as the government cracks down on access to foreign news sites ahead of the Communist Party's National Congress.
So Adam, 3D TV is dead. Should we be mourning the loss of a great technological innovation, or cheering because those stupid plastic glasses are dead?
Yeah, I don't think anyone's going to really miss it. I don't think anybody was really asking for it in the first place. 3D, it's every, 20 years or so we have a 3D revival. It comes back, and they're always looking for reasons to sell new television. So 3D was the next big thing. We had Avatar and a couple of movies at the cinemas that were pretty good in 3D, and then a lot of movies that weren't very good in 3D because it was sort of tacked on afterwards, and people just don't care. From my experience, the only thing that made a 3D TV worth having was the games. If you had some good games on a PlayStation that was really involving and engrossing, and you would forget you're wearing the glasses and really get into it. But it comes to sport and movies, they're sort of more hassle than they're worth. I know that you kind of guy who pukes his guts when he even walks in the same room as a 3D television, but do you think that anyone else will miss it?
Well, look, my issue was predominantly always with the active shutter glasses, and this was the other part of the problem. It was an expensive proposition, especially on the active shutter side.
Yeah.
At least if you had a TV that used passive, which was LG's run, for example, then the glasses you got at the cinema, you could just pocket as you walked out, and they would work just fine. But I guess the other problem that 3D had, of course, was not just the technology, which was a bit iffy, especially if you tried to do that forced 3D thing. It was the fact that there just wasn't that much content. You could buy Blu-rays which were 3D capable, but they cost more, so almost nobody did. And there were a few trial telecasts of 3D. From memory, the 2012 Olympics, I think, had some 3D sections. And I think, and this is my lack of sports knowledge shining through, I think there was at least one NRL game, might have been a State of Origin, which was in 3D. Don't know if the AFL did something similar around the same time. But apart from that, there really wasn't that much to watch. So you're right, the games, I think, was where it had potential. But again, it just didn't really live up to it. An awful lot of the 3D games were more gimmicky than they were immersive in the way that you'd really want. And for the longest time, the best reason to buy a 3D TV wasn't 3D. It was the other things it could do. It was the fact that 3D was the cutting-edge feature, so it was on the cutting-edge TVs, which tended to have good images.
Yeah, I think at its peak, the BBC was talking about 3D. I think we had the World Cup in 3D. ESPN maybe had a 3D channel, and so there was a lot of 3D content flowing through to Foxtel, and everyone got all excited about it, and then went, nobody seems to care. And so one by one, they all dropped off, and now, nobody's going to shed any tears over this, I think. All right, so Alex, Samsung's finally come out and told us exactly what went wrong with their explodey phones. Run us through the details.
Okay, well, the details are really, really extensive, but it boils down to what everyone kind of already knew, which was, hey, these batteries are exploding. Essentially speaking, they've actually what they came out and said, and to their credit, they came out and gave a lot of detail. They could have simply said, "We have identified a battery fault. We will take no questions. Good afternoon."
Or you're holding it wrong.
There's that too. They didn't do that. They actually went into some detail talking about the density of the batteries, possible faulty welding, some issues to do with the insulation tape. And what was really interesting in all of this, aside from the stuff that might get electrical engineers all kind of hot under the collar, was the fact that it wasn't just one problem. It was a whole bunch of problems inherent in the design, and that they uncovered by testing an extraordinary number of phones, something like 200,000 Note 7s they put through the grinder to work out, right, well, what went wrong with the admittedly small number, they haven't really specified, but what went wrong with the ones that were exploding? Why did this happen? And it raises this kind of interesting question about public trust in the brand, because undoubtedly they took a bit of a hit on the Note 7, both financially because all this testing ain't cheap, but also, of course, they didn't get to sell all these phones and they've damaged the brand and so on. But at the same time, they've spent all this money on testing. They're arguably maybe a little better prepared to deal with the realities of battery technology, because exploding batteries are not a new thing entirely. Maybe they're the safest brand on the planet. What do you reckon?
I don't know. I think the fact that they sent out replacement ones and those ones were also a bit explodey is going to stick in people's minds for a while. Did they explain how they managed to send out replacements that were also duds?
Look, this comes down to the complexity of the way that they identified the faults could happen. It's multiple issues across multiple things. So essentially, they fixed what they thought was the problem, and then the other things cropped up as well, and they were getting things from multiple factories, which didn't help. Again, everyone kind of does this. But I agree with you. The replace and then pull all the replacements out was never a particularly good look. And of course, now they're looking forward. They're looking to the Galaxy S8, although this week it's emerged that they're not likely to launch that, as they traditionally have done with their Premium S phones, at Mobile World Congress. They're going to delay that launch. The rumours suggest that availability will be in April, which would suggest mid to late March launch, which would presumably be their own event.
I was going to say, that doesn't line up with anything else, does it? Because Mobile World Congress is in February, I want to say, in Barcelona?
End of February, exactly so. And what's interesting there as well is that it appears, again, these are reports, this is not something that Samsung, or for that matter Qualcomm, have verified. As I was saying in the news, it appears that Samsung's lined up an exclusive on the Snapdragon 835, which is the latest and greatest Snapdragon chipset. This may well mean that we might have to wait for the S8, but that it might be the best premium phone, because everyone else is going to go, well, we can't get that till at least April. That delays us, so perhaps we'll go with the 821, which is the underlying architecture for Google's Pixel phone, for example.
Yeah.
Nice enough device, but it's last year's device. Samsung might steal a huge march on the competitors. That's presuming, of course, that the 835 can live up to expectations, that it's not a chip that runs too hot, as some previous Snapdragons have. It's not a chip that chews up the battery, as some previous processors have. And, of course, that Samsung can produce a phone that doesn't explode.
Yeah. So, basically, their next phone has to be basically a killer phone in every way, but literally.
Exactly so. Exactly so. They really need to hit it out of the park, I think, because it's not just the people who want the latest and greatest. Samsung's entire strategy really revolves around, here's our premium phone, here's the Ferrari of phones, but hey, we also sell this whole little run of Corollas that kind of look the same, but they're much, much cheaper. That's where they sell the bulk of their phones, according to most reports, and as such, they need that hero phone to sell the entire brand. When the hero phone being the Note 7 explodes so much, that's going to have a knockdown effect on everything else. So Adam, you've been busy recently chatting to Mastercard. What have they got coming up this year?
Yeah, I caught up with Mastercard's innovation team at the Australian Open, and we were talking about plans for facial recognition, and here's what they had to say. So we've taken vertical hold on the road again this week. I'm at the Australian Open, and I'm talking to Doug Howe, who is Smart City Innovation Manager with Mastercard Australia, and we're talking about Mastercard ID Check. Doug, welcome to the show.
Hi, how you doing?
Good. Can you tell us a bit about what Mastercard ID Check is?
For sure. So the Mastercard ID Check is an alternative way of authenticating yourself. Mastercard take an approach that with authentication and security in payments, it's very, very important to make sure that we verify you are who you are, not just what you know. So today, when you authenticate a payment, you might put a PIN or a password into a website when you're using online e-commerce, and frequently people will forget those passwords, or they actually can be socially engineered by knowing things about you.
Yeah.
So the ID check is actually a biometric way of storing an algorithmic number based on either your facial recognition or your fingerprint recognition, that will actually help improve the safety and security of either logging into your banking network on mobile banking, or for authenticating payments when you're online.
So, and this is coming to Australia in 2017. Where are people likely to encounter it, and how are they likely to use it?
So the target launch is 2017. It's already available in 16 different markets around the world, and the rollout will be dependent on which banks actually take up the software. It's not mandatory. It's another layer of security that we're offering as a technology provider to issuing banks and to acquirers. So where might they see it? They might see it in some of their mobile banking apps to replace PIN for login. So this is a convenient way to be able to log into your mobile banking. Or they might see it for online transactions where they are asked to authenticate themselves. Or they might actually see it if there's a suspected fraudulent transaction from your bank. They may choose to use this software to say, please, can you identify yourself through your registered mobile device with your registered biometric, either fingerprint or facial recognition.
And so this works as a smartphone app, either through the Mastercard app, or they can build it into, we'll say, a bank's app. Can you talk me through a scenario? I'm buying something online, I get through the checkout, it wants to use this. How will it work? What will I see as the end user?
Yeah, so if you were doing an online transaction and let's say you were buying a pair of headphones for $200, when you get to the checkout and you're in that payment flow, you hit the checkout button, the system will know that you're actually trying to check out with a particular payment details, and you may be asked for a second factor of authentication. So in a out-of-band channel, so your mobile, you might be asked by a notification on your mobile, can you approve that this transaction for $200 that somebody is doing online is actually authorized by you? Can you authenticate that you are doing this transaction? So on the mobile device that you have, you will actually do your facial recognition or your fingerprint to authenticate that transaction and say, yes, this transaction was being made by me, and this is a second factor of authentication to prove it was.
And so what stops me just holding up a photo of someone to the screen and saying that it's them, that I'm them?
So there's a whole series of different layers, security methodologies and encryption and cryptographic algorithms that are put in place. One of the ones that we use, which is to prove liveliness, is that when you're actually capturing the image in the first place and converting that to an algorithm, is blinking. So by blinking, it's proving that you are actually more than a static image, and actually when it does those facial calculations, it takes that blinking into consideration.
And is there any charge for the end user to use this?
No, this is a technology that we actually offer to banks to actually help them reduce fraud and actually offer additional customer convenience, so that it becomes actually an easier way to authenticate and to do online payments.
So biometrics is still a bit of a controversial way to authenticate yourself. Some people think it's more convenient. Some people are worried about the security concerns. From your research and who you've spoken to, how do you find that people are responding to this kind of technology?
So the customer research we've done shows that people are more comfortable now because things like using your fingerprint to access your smartphone already is becoming quite ubiquitous. So people trust being able to use their fingerprints, and more facial recognition, they're becoming more comfortable with it. So people regard it as more secure than a PIN or a password that can easily be compromised and hacked.
And you're not actually storing the photograph of people's faces, are you?
No, after the image has been encrypted and the algorithm has been run against it to calculate all of the different dimensions and measurements on your face that goes to look at a particular algorithmic version of your face, the image is discarded, it's not stored anywhere, and that numeric string is all that is stored of those calculations that have been through a particular algorithm, and is only accessible through anybody that has those cryptographic keys. So that layered security approach again makes it highly secure. This is just another level of security on top of existing protocols.
And does the fingerprint reading work the same way in that it doesn't actually store your fingerprint?
Correct. The fingerprint device that's on your mobile, the fingerprint when you're actually using the fingerprint recognition, that all stays on your mobile device. It doesn't get transmitted anywhere. Again, it's an algorithmic string that is then secured cryptographically, that is sent to back office for matching, not the actual fingerprint itself.
And what kind of mobile devices will this work with?
So it's device and operating system independent. So as long as it's got a certified fingerprint reader, and the majority of them already now are following very well established standards for privacy and security. If it's been certified by Mastercard as being secure, then you can use that. Whether it be Android, whether it be iOS, it works on any device.
And so, but at the end of the day, whether or not you can use this will depend on whether your bank does a deal with the phone company or with the phone provider. With who?
No, nothing to do with the phone company or the phone provider. So the camera is accessible on all phones. There's no phones that lock down the camera at all. The fingerprint security, it's an open standard that you're actually able to interact with. So there is no deal needed to be done with the phone company. But it is your bank's choice of whether they actually do implement this additional method of authentication.
So it's an agreement between Mastercard and the bank, and it doesn't have anything to do with Apple or Samsung or Google?
Correct. So your bank effectively signs up to the technology with Mastercard. We provide the technology and the software development kit for them, and we keep it safe and secure. They offer it to their customers, and then you as a consumer would be able to use it through that bank's mobile banking application.
Great, thanks very much for joining us.
No problem, it's been a pleasure, thank you.
Well, that just about wraps it up for another episode of Vertical Hold. Got any thoughts about the topics we've discussed? Drop us a line via Twitter or the Vertical Hold Facebook page.
Thanks for listening, and remember, if you like what you hear, hit that subscribe button. Vertical Hold is proudly brought to you by Alcatel. The novelty of 3D soon wore off, and it turned out that most viewers weren't keen. While it was launched with great. All right, let's try it from the top.
In 2010 to coincide with a 3D revival in cinemas, the novelty soon wore off, and it turned out that most viewers weren't keen to wear 3D glasses in their lounge room. That's how it's done.